Once where lush forests of red spruce grew when I was younger, now there are large stands of dead red spruce, skeletons of trees that were once thriving in the high peaks. The legacy that we will pass along to our children if we don't act soon to control the emissions that cause acid rain will be one of selfish indifference towards generations to come.
That was from NBC's The Today Show in 1988. We did act to control the emissions that cause acid rain. Critics at the time said the sky would fall as a result. The sky is still there. Today, the Obama administration announced new plans to control emissions from power plants, and the same sky is falling critics are making the same arguments all over again. Joining us now tonight, I'm happy to say, is William Riley. He's the EPA administrator. You can see standing here with the president. He was the EPA administrator under George H.W. Bush, who helped write those acid rain regulations in the 1990s. Mr. William Riley, thank you very much for being with us tonight. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here and to listen to your history. You brought back a lot of memories of environmental victories.
Well, thanks. I'm glad it sounds that way to you because it implies that I didn't screw anything up. But I guess I should ask you about whether, in hindsight, now looking back at it, I feel like the objections that were made, the sky is falling stuff, specifically about the economy, it all seems so disproven and so clearly wrong in terms of the implications of those arguments of your critics at the time. Did it feel that way at the time? Was it a harder fight than it looks like in hindsight?
They were all hard fights. There were always critics and there were always economic arguments. One interesting facet of virtually every one of those statutes that you mentioned is that EPA itself overestimated the cost of accommodating those rules, including the acid rain title, where the Electric Energy predicted it would cost about $1,500 a ton to remove sulfur dioxide. EPA's number was $600 to $700. It came in under $200. Now, that was a consequence of ingenuity, innovation, all of the things that characterize America at its best. And it's a statute that worked, and acid rain was put under control.
Do you think that the arguments from the administration right now are sound, that ingenuity can be driven by system-wide controls like this, that this will not only take carbon out of the atmosphere, which is a thing we need to do, but that it will actually increase both energy efficiency and ingenuity and ultimately create jobs as America essentially evolves to respond to the new reality of a controlled carbon future? Do you think the administration's right about that?
You know, I think the United States is in a much better position to take this move now than at any time in the recent past. We have, in many parts of the country, an excess of electricity. We haven't yet gotten back to where we were in 2005 in most states. We have minimum renewable energy requirements in 36 states. We have efficiency capabilities. We have the smart grid. We have a lot more technology for controlling the use of energy in our homes. And we have, as you mentioned, the automobile fuel efficiency standards, which will take us, I think they're expected to reduce by about 2.25 million barrels a day when they're fully implemented. So a lot is happening. We all have cheap natural gas. That has been responsible already for making a good deal of progress in reducing greenhouse gases. And it will benefit significantly from this statute, this regulation.
When you look back at the way that the George H.W. Bush administration handled its critics, these people who said that this would be too costly, there was no reason that it should cost jobs and the whole thing. When you look back at the way you handled those critics and you look at what the Obama administration has to do now in terms of essentially selling these new rules, there's going to be a public comment period for a year. Has the political environment in Washington changed so much that it's impossible to draw lessons from your earlier experience, or did you go through things that should inform the political fight now?
Well, the politics changed, obviously. We had an enthusiastic Republican president and White House. Though we had critics and skeptics, the budget director predicted it would bring on a recession to pass the Clean Air Act amendments of 1991. We had a very energetic and effective majority leader in the Senate who had been not so patiently waiting for acid rain controls as a senator from Maine for at least 15 years. And we eventually got a vote of 88 in the Senate out of 100 in favor of the amendments. Now, it took 2 years almost to get there, and there were certainly a lot of skirmishes along the way. We had very strong support from Western Republican senators and congressmen for the acid rain title in the Clean Air Act. So I don't see the same situation today. It's a different politics. It's a different view of problems. We had a major regional problem then, of course, in acid rain. Climate change affects the whole world, and that's obviously going to be a much larger challenge to address. But we've started, and in a very significant, historic way.
Do you foresee any resurgence in conservation-minded republicanism? The sort of the scientific denialism that has underlaid so much of the environmental politics in the Republican Party recently seems to me to be a not long-term sustainable stance. Too many smart people involved in politics to let that be the party's permanent stance. Do you think that's going to turn around in the Republican Party?
I tend to agree with that. One thing that I look back on is a significant change in 1988 from the Reagan emphases and priorities on the environment to President George H.W. Bush's priorities. The country really got it in the summer of '88. It was a time of warming, of significant ozone alerts in many of that's ground level ozone pollution. In many of the cities of the country, we had medical waste washing up on the beaches of New Jersey and Long Island. We had an unusual attention to both upper atmospheric ozone depletion and climate. My view is that moment will come again. The country will again get concerned about some aspect or other of climate change. One of the big things that's different now from then is when we looked at climate change then, we largely depended on computers. And we did have the National Academy of Sciences and the scientific community saying, you got a problem here, you got to address it. But we didn't have the evidence we have now. Just last week in Norway, in the Arctic, I saw retreating glaciers. I saw fjords that no longer freeze at this time of year. That's happening all over the Arctic, and there are many manifestations of the spring and summer coming earlier to the farm country. People are getting the fact that there is change, and I think the next question is, well, are we causing it? Apparently, most of the country is not yet sure of that, but I think they'll come to be, and I think they'll demand action.
William Riley, former EPA administrator under the George H.W. Bush administration. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. I really appreciate your time.